and welcome to episode 7 of Quarantine Conversations. I'm Samantha Lane with Lumina Coaching, and I would guess that there's not a person out there who doesn't have some sort of health ailment going on, whether it be poor sleep or gut issues or that strange rash that comes back with an allergy every year, who knows what. And that is why it is so important to have practitioners such as Brooke Seiz out there. We're going to chat with her today about how she supports men and women in understanding the root causes of what's going on in your unique body and then what to do about it. She's a functional nutrition practitioner, and I can't wait for you to hear her expertise and what she's got to say to support you to be energized and healthy. Please enjoy. Well, hi, Brooke. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, coming off the long Memorial Day weekend, hopefully feeling rested and rejuvenated.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, for our listeners, so Brooke is a functional nutrition practitioner, and I'll definitely let her explain more about that. But as I understand it, it's all about looking at the whole person and root causes. And I know I've really benefited from having a practitioner such as yourself in my life to uncover some aches and pains and things that have been ongoing in my life. Same with my sister, she's really benefited. And so I'm so excited to have you share with our audience today more about what you do, how you got into it, and why it matters in maybe like the big picture of how people can get support for their health. So if you want to maybe just start off giving us a little bit of how you define it, your background or foundation, whatever is fitting for you.
Yeah. Well, I had my own journey, with my health, which is what led me to functional nutrition. I didn't know what that was. Even when I was dealing with my own health issues, I had no idea what that was. And I found a nutritionist who was a holistic nutritionist that I went to. And she started talking about how there were root causes for some of the symptoms I had, and a number of things that she said clicked. So, I went through that process myself and became really passionate about wellness and everything I learned. And so went to school for holistic nutrition initially. And one of the classes I took was clinical nutrition, and I loved it. I kind of fell in love with really understanding what's going on in someone's body so that we can tailor their nutrition to their own individual unique needs. Yeah. And so eventually went into a functional medicine certification and, have been putting all those pieces together. I'm actually finishing a master's in counseling psychology now because that's a big piece. So I really kind of look at that holistic. I know you and I have talked about that a lot.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's a really interesting piece to kind of launch off that counseling piece of, when you're looking at the whole person. So one of the things that I love about coaching is those 8 dimensions of wellness, and people have heard me talk about that. And so, physical wellness being one dimension, our diet, our nutrition, our sleep, our exercise, but all these dimensions don't stand on their own. And so much of that can be tied to our emotional wellness. I know just for myself, when I had some lower levels of, nutrients in my body, then it was really impacting my emotional health. And so I think that counseling piece is really unique. So can you share a little bit why you decided that would be another good fit and a complement to the nutritional counseling you're already doing?
Yeah. When I started working in nutrition, I primarily was just kind of a holistic nutrition provider. I read everything I could find on functional medicine, but I hadn't gotten trained in it yet. So I spent, 6 or 7 years just working in nutrition, and there's so much counseling to it. And I kept referring people to counselors, gentle questions would come up about stress or history of trauma. And I just found myself referring out a lot and realized I would like having those conversations more so, but, wasn't licensed to do that yet or trained in that. So that I knew was something in the long run I wanted to add on because I think it's just as important. We always talk about how we eat every day, or oftentimes we eat every day, but we think every millisecond. That's actually even maybe more impactful, than nutrition. I don't want to say more. They're both huge, but.
And the way that we talk to ourselves about nutrition and the way that we have that conversation with ourselves, that's been really enlightening for me, being around my parents a lot and understanding my own relationship with food and nutrition and my health journey, and then also, walking with family members on their health journey. And as Brene Brown would say, like, the stories we tell ourselves, well, we have a story we tell ourselves about food too, and about how we feed our body or fuel our body or punish our body. Or does that come up with clients?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. That is another reason that led me into counseling as well, as because of that conversation. And it's such a dance, even in an appointment with someone, to work on the language we're using around food. And we can't really change it unless we do.
Mm-hmm. Can you paint maybe I know there's probably not a stereotypical client, but maybe just if we had somebody that we could kind of picture who might, land in your sessions, or give us a little bit of a story of how someone determines that it is really powerful to partner with you, or they have the urgency to partner with you. What might they be dealing with?
Yeah, a lot of times they're dealing with what they feel like could be hormone imbalance or low energy, or they're feeling a lot of anxiety. Sometimes it's like back and forth. I always talk about that feeling that I know I went through this at one point in my journey of, like, suddenly I wake up in the morning and I don't have the energy I used to have. Like, I feel really dumpy, and at some point I get going, but then throughout the day, it's like, I can't tell from day to day, is my energy going to be good today, or is it going to come and go? And am I going to crash? And so that kind of like poor energy, it can, I do have a lot of clients that have hormone issues. They know that they already do. Sometimes it's just though that like mood and energy problems.
Okay. And it must be, even the way you described it, it sounds like these people are probably, like, it's been happening for some time. They're like, okay, I tried the sleep thing, I tried the caffeine thing, and we just know when we don't feel ourselves, though, when we don't feel well. And so they get to this point where it's like, what else could it be? Like, I want to figure it out.
Yeah. And so many of the same, this is something we talk about in functional medicine all the time, is that symptoms are very sneaky and tricky. You can have low energy and the root cause could be insulin resistance, or, somebody is pre-diabetic, but it could also be that they have imbalanced cortisol levels throughout the day. Like, their circadian rhythms off, their hormones are low, and their blood sugar is maybe getting knocked off because of that, but that's not the initial root issue. So they work on their diet, they work on their sleep, they do a lot of the things that are great to do first, but they're just not, it's like, I can't figure it out. And that's when we typically need to do a little more clinical investigation and figure out what's going on.
So what does that look like? What does more clinical investigation mean?
Yeah. Usually some lab work. If somebody's just really wanting to work on it from a diet perspective, we can really get nitty gritty and kind of track foods. And I always say this, not to be judgy, not to be critical about it, but just to be mindful and figure out, what's going on and play with it. And how can we really mindfully adjust things and see if that does it? And if not, usually getting some lab work, gut, like issues with the microbiome, gut issues can cause these things as well. So we might get some gut testing, some hormone testing, some blood work, blood sugar markers. Yeah. And usually once we see a lot of that, low iron could cause someone to feel tired. So we want to rule out some of these typical, you mentioned micronutrient deficiencies. So,
well, and it's so striking to me how that can feel like some heavy lifting up front, but the benefit and the value of that long-term for someone's life. How many humans are walking around tired and depleted, and they're thinking, maybe I'm on my screen too much. Maybe I'm not getting enough quality sleep. Okay, yes, we are a stressed out society, and there's, things that we can change in our environment. But there's also it's a whole complex system in here. And so to really understand the levels, and I know something that was really helpful for me. So I did have low iron, as you just mentioned, and my, primary practitioner, she flagged that and was just sort of like, take some iron pills. And that was that, no more questions. Like, I'm a healthy 31-year-old, who eats a balanced diet, and we're like, why do I have low iron? Like that was the question that I had, like what could be going on here? And that's when I worked with a practitioner such as yourself, who then said, all right, let's do these labs and another, some gut tests and some different things. And we're able to identify. And it's so helpful to truly understand a cause. I mean, do you see that with your clients, with your patients, like those aha moments to be like, I'm not crazy. There was something going on inside.
Yes. And I love it. I love it every time. It's kind of what gets me up doing this every day. And I had that same experience. It was like, oh my goodness, I'm not crazy.
Yeah. So what was yours? It was more allergy related, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. The first bite of food that I had as an infant sent me to the hospital. So I had food sensitivities and allergies right from the get-go.
Wow.
And an innate fear of food.
Yeah.
And so
that sounds traumatic.
Yeah. And that's part of the counseling piece too. And I went through my own counseling, in college and after college, because I also had like fear of food, and I was afraid that certain things I would eat would cause, because I grew up I would break out in hives all the time. It was so normal. I popped Benadryl all the time. I was always bloated. So I was a dancer and a performer. And so, I both wanted, I wouldn't say I really had too many body image issues, but because of like this negative conversation my body seemed to have with food, I definitely had some disordered eating patterns in late high school and in college. And so, but I craved sugar like crazy. And eventually that did start causing anxiety for me and some things like that. So I started having the mood and the energy stuff. And when I finally found a practitioner to go to, it was because her website said yeast overgrowth and gut problems can cause sugar cravings and mood disruption and sleep and anxiety. And I was like, oh, that's all kind of like raising a red flag for me. Yeah. And I couldn't believe, like, when I did adjust my diet and address my gut issues, I didn't crave sugar the same way. Like this whole itch got taken away that I had felt a little out of control around.
And that one key thing, I mean, let's pretend that was the only thing you changed. I mean, how many women and men potentially feel so like they're failing every day because they can't quit sugar? Yeah. And they feel like, this is a battle of self-discipline. And it's like, actually, there was something in your body that was overgrowing that wanted you to eat that.
Yeah. I always tell people that our gut bacteria and all the microorganisms that live in there, they tell us they eat first. Yeah. They eat before our cells get fed.
Yeah. And it's a totally fascinating discussion to me. And particularly because the depth that you can go with your training about these nitty-gritty things that I truly don't think some of our general practitioners, I mean, I don't know exactly the training for doctors, but it's here that it's like a semester about nutrition or like 3 weeks or something, right? And here you've been training for years, and with your own journey, and now your professional journey too. And just the richness that can bring when understanding exactly what our bodies need, and how one key supplement can make a difference, or cutting out one key food that doesn't work for you, and the benefits that can bring.
Yeah, I'm consistently wowed, even in just my own day-to-day health, with what one little change with diet can do from day to day,
So what are some of the benefits you're now living? Like, what are some of the things in your own life since you've just discovered that about yourself and made changes? What do you notice?
Yeah, I actually just sent out an email yesterday about how I improve my energy during a pandemic.
Nice. Okay. Some people are curious about how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I've been either pregnant or nursing for the last 8 out of 9 years. I realized when I did the math.
Wow.
And I'm done having children and, done with all of that. And so throughout that time, I've always had to adjust macronutrients and like portions of food as things come and go. And this is, I think, normal, even if you never have kids or you are not a female, we all have these shifts through the life cycle. And sometimes it changes due to like our movement through the day. Like, are we sitting? Are we moving?
Sure.
What's our, what's our level of exercise, like all of these different things. And so we always kind of have to readjust what we're eating. We tend to not do that. It's like we find something that works and we get into that habit. And so I was kind of, I think, in a certain habit, and I started realizing like, I think my energy should be a little better. And so I started tracking my food just to see, and made some changes to macronutrients. And it was like, lights on, my brain's working better. I feel much better.
Wow.
And I think I just had, the reason it was during this time period is that I had a little more time to do that.
Yeah. Can you educate us about macronutrients, please?
Yes. Macronutrients are protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And the ratio of those in our diet can really affect how our hormones work and how our brain's functioning and our blood sugar balance and all of that. And it can be tricky, and people have really different needs. So that is the approach of functional nutrition, is that it is not a one size fits all. It's very individualized.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to that in relation to, diet trends out there. And, there's a million, and there's probably so many of them that are just for the quick buck. But then there's the ones that seem to last and stay and really perhaps are promoting a healthier lifestyle and a healthier family and person. I know that I see some people in my own life who it's hard to know, are you getting the correct education and like what really works. So when you said macronutrients and the different, buildup of protein, like keto, for instance, is huge right now. But I wonder if you could just speak to, for the average person, what do they need to know and what could they ask themselves to say, does this diet potentially work for me?
Yeah. Some basics to start with are, if you know you have blood sugar, like insulin resistant blood sugar issues, that's diabetes, prediabetes, and that's pretty prevalent in the United States. And so if that's going on, a keto or a lower carb approach is definitely the way to go. Mm-hmm. If that's not an issue, and though that you have some hormone issues going on, or stress, cortisol, low energy, I would start someone not necessarily with like high carb, but I always call it Mediterranean gluten-free. So, gluten can be a little more inflammatory, so you might try taking that out, but get some, like a moderate amount of carbohydrates, some healthy fat, protein. I mean, a good starting place, if you look at a plate, is just half a plate of non-starchy veggies, a palm-sized portion of protein-containing food, a little healthy fat, and some complex carbohydrates like quinoa or sweet potato or fruit or something like that. And then we adjust from there.
Yeah. So very veggie forward, which makes a lot of sense. It's going to be the most nutrient dense and also lower calorie and lower carb and all of that. But I think it's so interesting. Nothing in what you just said had anything to do with somebody's weight. And how many people pick up a keto or paleo because it promises to help them lose weight? And it's like, well, what if that's not what's right for your body?
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because sometimes what's not right is not right now. Meaning that somebody could have just come off of a period of a lot of stress and they're dealing with some different things. And so keto, although on one level it might sound good, it may not be right now. But once you get some of the underlying dysfunction imbalance, it could be okay later.
Yeah. You mentioned stress right there. So I'm just curious, and this kind of leads back to, I think, that counseling piece we started off with, but what do you say about stress? What do you say about stress, how it impacts our mood, our body, and maybe even what we crave with our food, or any tips or just things you might share around what you've learned around stress?
Yeah, it's such a big question. So I'm thinking of like the quickest tips. Yeah, I mean, it's just so impactful. Even one moment of feeling stressed, if we think about that in terms of evolution and what that's for, it's so that we can escape from danger. And when we're in danger, our body wants to run or hide. And to do that, we need energy to our cells. So our blood sugar is going to go up. So just in that very simple, explanation, it impacts blood sugar. And so that's why some people will actually go on keto. And if they're dealing with a lot of stress, they're still not really in ketosis because they're stressed all the time and they're releasing blood sugar. It's going to affect cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which impacts our other hormones. And so it really, stress can kind of wreak havoc on our metabolism, but balanced approaches to stress, like us being able to transform it and manage it, can be really amazing for our metabolism and our health. So, at a very, I guess, as like a little takeaway or tip, I think just having even 3 to 5 minutes of something that you do daily to balance stress is so huge.
Yeah. And that could be, so like tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system, like things like that, whether it's deep breathing or meditation or creativity or whatever it might be.
Yeah. One thing with what's going on right now is that if we're working at home, like going outside to work can really influence the effects of stress, of stress that we get from our job, or sometimes I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, just like looking out a window can be really powerful. Like it's those little things when it comes to eating. I always tell people one thing they can do to mindfully eat is that when they're at the table having conversations is to notice when they feel relaxed, and when they do, chew slowly and eat. And if they're having a conversation where they get excited or they get frustrated or whatever, just put the fork down, have the conversation, and then take a couple deep breaths and resettle and go back to eating.
Yeah. I am curious around how many people are having more meals at home, not on the go, not stopping at restaurants, and just what that might be doing to their relationship with food, or being able to slow down and put the fork down or whatever it is, because I'm guilty of way too many meals in the car, in between things, whether it's, something kind of hands-free like a smoothie or whatever, that's like, how can I be mindfully eating right now? You said in something I've heard you before around the benefit that the creativity that you had in your life when you were a performer of dancing and singing, not only was that hard work, but also somewhat stress relieving because it's tapping into all these creative things, you're using your body. But there was something about that and help me out here around like the very act of singing and using your voice and how that tapped into.
Yeah. Yes, I think I know what you're talking about, which is just this physiology of the voice and how it impacts our nervous system and by way of that impacts our gut in a positive way. And so my experience with that is that I started performing when I was really young. So I didn't really ever know how to function in the world without it until I stopped. And then I had a very rude awakening and had to kind of like realize how important that was for me and what else I needed to do to manage stress and to find ways to play and all of that. So, it literally, we know, and you always talk about this, that play is important and stress management, all of these different components. And then it also has this direct effects on our nervous system. We can actually help it stimulates the vagal nerve, which is going to innervate, so many places in the body just by humming or singing.
Yeah. I think you used the really beautiful example of humming to your newborn who was having some tough times, some newborn times. And so the humming, was soothing for you, but then also for your child. And I have been thinking about that all weekend, because how for those of us that don't have play just in our days, I might have exercise and movement, maybe even some deep breathing with yoga or whatever, but that singing portion, like I made myself put on some music and sing out loud and kind of like move my body with the music. So I was like, I don't know, I think this is helpful.
I love that.
And I just, the reason I'm sharing that, I guess, with our audience now is that, I think of stress relieving practices as just trying to put more drops in the bucket of things that are healthy for you, things that help you be happy than not. And hadn't planned on sharing Brene Brown twice in this, but her example, she has an example about building trust. I think it's in her Daring Greatly book, and how her daughter came home from school after one of her friends in third grade had like broken her trust and shared something, you know, mildly embarrassing to their friends. And so they were trying to think about like, well, how do we know if people, you know, trust us? And so they used the example of her teacher had a marble jar where, you know, if the class was doing collectively well and behaving, then, you know, okay, here's some marbles. And then when it's all filled up, you know, then they get a party or whatever. And I think about that, like drops in the trust bucket, you know, drops in the positivity bucket, drops in the health bucket, the stress relieving bucket. And so, you know, for people to know that you do not have to have an hour-long day, you know, hour-long meditation practice a day. You don't have to be a performer or whatever, or change your whole routine. But what about just taking 5 deep breaths outside before you get into your car and leave for work? You know, what about just gazing at water, or, you know, all these different things that we can put a drop in the bucket and watch that stress scale tip the other direction.
Yeah, it's so true. There's this pleasure exercise I've had some clients do that mainly when I ask them what they do find enjoyable in the day and they don't have easy answers, then we just do this like pleasure exercise. Like notice what is pleasurable to you throughout the day. It does not have to be big. Like one thing for me is the feeling of my kid's cheeks on my cheek. Like it feels so good, but it's something that on a busy day I could just skip, you know, but like I really just take that moment, like an extra few seconds, and like really feel it. It's so enjoyable and it's very soothing.
Yeah, that's a great example. And just like, to really enjoy it, let it be a true drop in the bucket, you know, and then to build from there. It reminds me too of a long time ago, I read this article about Blue Mind and how, you know, relating to nature, how water, you know, we like going to a cabin or a beach. And for a lot of us, especially those in landlocked states, you know, that's a vacation, that's an escape, that's, you know, a new adventure. But there really is something about water, even just like taking a bath or drinking a glass of water, or it's why there's fish tanks in dentist office, because of the brain, you know, whole response and how it calms us. So I'll think about that on particularly stressful days, or maybe if my sister's feeling kind of stressed, I'm like, add water. What can we do to have her play with some water or be in water or whatever?
Yeah, it's so true. I think you see that with people all the time. I know I see it with my kids. Like we just pull water out and suddenly everybody is.
Yeah. Well, so to bring it back to nutrition, where do people, what can they expect? So I know we talked a little bit about like, here's the clinical approach, you know, you can do some testing. What does some of the approaches and the treatments then look like? And I imagine that some people are like, I don't want to cut everything out of my diet and I don't want to take, you know, 12 supplements a day. Can you share a little bit of maybe about the spectrum of what's available that people can still really get quality results to whatever root cause is?
Yeah. When I start working with someone new, the first session is always a case review, because everybody has, you know, they all want something different. So we really go over both what's going on, and so I can put kind of my assessment hat on to see like what do we need to look for, what's some possibilities here, you know, give that person a big picture of what we might want to look for, but also for me to hear what are the goals and what, you know, because there are some different ways that you can work on these things. And I do have, you know, some clients that we won't do any labs because they're just not wanting to invest in that right now. And so we work with all the information we have and, you know, play around with what they're willing and able to do. And so it, you know, I think again, that individualized approach, like I know I've been ready at some times to really jump in and make a lot of changes, and at other times I haven't, but it doesn't mean I haven't wanted to feel as good as I can, knowing my own limitations in that time period.
Right. And to know, like you said, that uniqueness of, is it an ongoing issue? Like maybe there's a soy intolerance or something that you might have to always, you know, kind of bypass and stay away from. Or maybe, in my case, it's like a specific H. pylori bacteria in my gut. It's like once that's treated, then what health cascades from there,
Yeah. Yep.
So like a specific approach or a long-term approach or both where necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, like I was at points where I didn't want to invest in labs and I didn't. And so I will work with people that way too. And it can be useful and helpful. But at the same time, I did spend a lot of years buying too many supplements and trying too many things. Like I would of time and money. And so looking back on it, once I did finally like jump in, I was like, oh, that didn't actually take that long. Like you said, like I had 2 or 3 visits and paid for some labs, and I sorted out stuff that I'm still doing a decade later.
Yeah. No, that does make a lot of sense because we can pick up things like, oh, this magnesium might help that and this might not help that. But that's kind of where I was at, where I can put a bunch of supplements on it and try to get those micronutrients up, but it's not absorbing because there's something else going on blocking it. So until I take care of that root cause, right? Yeah, it's just fascinating. So I'm curious, let me check the time here. Oh yeah, okay. So what can people expect if they wanted to partner with you or practitioners like you? And maybe even speak a little bit about the complementary nature with a general practitioner or the rest of the health team as well.
Yeah. So I always offer a complimentary discovery chat, 30-minute appointment. And so if people are interested in just learning about, what that would look like or asking some questions, getting some tips and walking off and getting going with that, I always start there. And then if somebody's ready to kind of do that initial appointment, I will give them a bunch of, lab recommendations, a starting approach for, nutrition adjustments. And we figure that out together too. I'm not the type of person who's like, here, do this, it's like, here's the thoughts. Like, now let's talk it through and figure out what works. Maybe some supplement or lifestyle approaches to start. And then if somebody has a primary care provider that would be willing to get some of the functional blood work that we don't have yet, then that's really great. And we can just kind of partner up on that, and then meet again and have, let that inform us on some dietary adjustments to make. If not, we can get those ordered and, just go from there. So I'm always, just kind of seeing where someone's at and who they already have on their team, and then figuring out where we can fill in the gaps.
Yeah. So I'm assuming, telehealth works great too, or you are in Kansas City if people wanted or were able to meet in person still, definitely in this COVID time, being able to meet people via phone or Zoom. And then also that the life cycle could look very different. Maybe there's kind of weekly check-ins for a while and then monthly and then, revisiting labs after 6 months or things like that.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Right now I'm seeing almost everyone virtually with everything going on. But yeah, I have an office at 80th and State Line in Prairie Village. So
yeah, awesome.
In person here.
So I want to make sure people know to follow you on Instagram because Brooke, you have just a ton of really awesome content, personal stories, the way that you can see you walking the talk of living a fulfilling and like enriching life. And that in and of itself is a pick me up and an inspiration. But truly, I mean, all of the different things that you're knowledgeable about. And so where can people find you on Instagram if they want to follow?
Yeah, it's Instagram. It's at Brooke Seiz the Day, like Seize the Day. My last name's Seiz, Seiz. So just add an E, the day. Brooke Seiz.
Awesome. Perfect. And I'll put that in the show notes too. And then your website is?
wiredandtiredwomen.com.
Perfect. And there's contact info and people can get in touch with you there if they want to sign up for that complimentary discovery chat. Yeah. Awesome. So my 2 final questions before we go. One is, what is something, to whatever extent you would like to share, that has been challenging for you in this COVID pandemic change?
Yeah. I think the most challenging thing is not directly with me, but more so with my husband, because he's a musician and my heart is very much in the arts, of course. I was a musical theater actress until I turned 30, and I turned 40 this year. So I've now been in wellness for 10 years. And I was before, I was a yoga teacher before, but officially, you know, the last decade. And so he, you know, that is one of the fields that's definitely not running right now, and probably back for a while. And so, so just watching him navigate that, and having gone through my own journey of leaving the arts and feeling the grief of not having it every day, like it's kind of watching that now from the outside, but I'm kind of like, you know, I'm really empathetic to that experience, and it kind of hits me in a spot. So that's probably been the hardest part, is just kind of witnessing, I guess, that and he's figuring it out and getting creative, and you know, but it was definitely a grieving process at first. I think just everything we've talked about, to have that that outlet every day is so important, and it's something I think I have relied on for a long time for my own health, and I didn't know it, you know. So.
I'm so glad you shared that, because as someone not in the arts or intimately connected with somebody that, you know, performing and being with an audience is their livelihood, it's easy for me to forget. And so I'm really glad that I have that reminder. And it reminds me in some ways how athletes, you know, when they have their college career or even their professional career or Olympic career, and then, you know, then they graduate, then they're just done, or then they retire, and just the grief from that. And so here, you know, your husband didn't choose to retire. He didn't choose to graduate and be done with this career and this path. And so it's kind of a whole level of watching your friends be in the same boat and your community. And yeah, that's a lot of change at once.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, though, is there something that's been, you know, pleasantly surprising or just really enjoyable about this change in this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the same note, there's so much growth that comes out of painful events too. And so, you know, I would say even just for my relationship with my husband, like that's growing in ways that we just didn't have time to focus on, but then also working through all of his career together, you know, has some like really nice benefits, and being together as a family, because he worked at night and I worked during the day. We didn't really get time with our family of 5 all together at one time very often through the week. There was a lot of like passing ships in the night, you know, with mom and dad. So we've had a lot of really nice time together and more time outside, and I'm able to focus a little more on my health. And I do feel now that we've made it through processing everything, I'm more relaxed now. And I think that's been really nice. I've been getting up and doing yoga in the morning because I don't have to run kids to school. Just, yeah, there's a lot of health benefits, I think, coming out of it.
Sure. Being creative with that new space and the capacity that you're finding. Yeah, truly, you do seize the day, and it's wonderful. And I just thank you so much for having this chat with us and sharing your expertise and your knowledge, and hope that people take their health seriously, in the sense that you can be empowered with it and really have, really, you know, be able to enjoy a healthy, long life and get rid of some of these things that are holding us back from that. So go check her out. And any final thoughts for us today then, Brooke?
No, just thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. So I'm honored that you invited me and set this up.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely to see your face as always. All right, take care.
Thank you. Thanks.
Many people can relate to feeling stuck when you're navigating a huge life change. It can be so discouraging when you're unsure about what next step to take. I'm Samantha Lane, a certified life coach, and I partner one-on-one with men and women to create clearer thinking and more purposeful action. I happen to specialize in those who are anticipating retirement, as that's a transition that's going to impact all areas of your life. If that's you, or if you know someone who's navigating a big life change, I hope you'll sign up for a free strategy session at lumina-coaching.com. Thanks for watching Quarantine Conversations. I hope you enjoyed.